I just had this epiphany moment in the Times Square subway station, trying to get the bus to get back to daycare, pick up daycare. And it was just this very stressful moment. And I read about it in my book because it's just so over the top emotional, 8 months pregnant in heels. And I just said, this is crazy. And the funny part is that I was supposed to interview Taylor Swift that evening. And I said, nope, you guys can do it. My team can go and do it. And I needed to get to daycare. Give yourself grace and remind yourself that you're worthy. Because I think a lot of times we don't, let ourselves know that, remind ourselves that we're worthy of changing our current situation. So you can feel like you're misaligned or you're stuck, but you're worthy. It's not selfish. You're worthy of trying to make that change, to feel whole again, to feel where you want to be and feel fulfilled.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to this episode of the Life in Transition podcast. I'm very excited today to have with us Shannon Russell. Shannon is a boy mom of 2. She is a career transition coach and a newly minted author. Shannon, very much welcome to the Life in Transition podcast. So glad you're here.
Art, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for the conversation today.
Yeah, me too. I love these conversations. As we were just saying off camera, I love authentic conversations. And it's one of the great gifts of podcasting, I feel, is the ability that I get to have really meaningful, authentic conversations with a lot of very interesting people.
Absolutely.
Right? Even my wife was a guest a little while ago, and that was, we've been married almost 31 years next week.
Wow.
And it was really amazing, to have that conversation, to put the time aside and to follow the process that I always do, and to, put her in that seat. And we had a great conversation.
She must have loved it.
Yeah. And I learned things that I never knew too, even after being married 31 years,
That's great.
So I love the format for authentic conversations. It's really great. So jumping into the conversation, this is Life in Transition. What would you consider to be one of the most meaningful or interesting or educational transitions that you've been through in your life, Shannon?
Gosh, I think probably becoming a mom for the first time, because not only was that my dream forever and you're holding this little boy, but then it just led to a career transition and life in general transition. Yeah. So it was just that catalyst to really change everything, my whole world. So yeah, that was the most meaningful and impactful for sure.
When was that? When were you? I know you're a mom of 2. So when was your first birth?
2012. He just turned 13. Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It goes quickly. Last week, I'm officially empty nest now with 3. So as of last Wednesday.
How are you feeling?
Good. I mean, it was time. He was boomerang. He'd come back from college. I have 2 in college, and he had not graduated, but he'd come back and was working for a while and saving his money, and got his own place and took everything with him. That's all of his keepsakes and everything. So we loaded up the big U-Haul and moved into his apartment. So I'm really
that's
proud
incredible.
of him,
That's incredible.
And really happy. And he came back last night for dinner, for his first visiting dinner, so to speak.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And we'll do that every week or 2. So no, it's really good, and it goes fast. So pay attention, and enjoy it, soak it up.
Yeah.
All right. That's really great. So take us through a little bit. I mean, I've been there as a dad. It's very different than the mom, but I've been there as a dad. But what was it like in the moment? What you mentioned, holding this little boy in your hands? What changed? What was the transition? I mean, I know there was tons of stuff that come after that, and we'll get to that probably too. But what was the moment? What was the momentary transition going on there for you?
I think shock, really shock of wow, I had this extremely full life and nothing was ever going to be the same. Right? Now all of my focus, and I had him, I guess I was early mid 30s. And I felt like I lived almost a very selfish life up until that point, going out 7 nights a week and having a great big friend group and this great career. But looking at him in that moment, it seemed like everything was shifting. And now every priority was this little boy and being a mom, and just, I can remember that moment so clearly.
What were the feelings that were coming up for you?
Yeah, really scared. I had an emergency C-section, and it was kind of a traumatic situation. So then I'm in a lot of pain. So it was just coming back to our apartment in Los Angeles and being in pain and having my parents there and my husband's parents there and just wanting really to curl up in a ball, but you can't because you're really learning how to take care of this baby, right? It was just all new. Being excited but terrified at the same time, because all that prep, everything changed when it became an emergency at the hospital, and all my perfect prep went out the window. Right. So it made me think, wow, nothing is going to prepare me for what's to come after this.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because you said, earlier you said that being a mom was something you always looked forward to and you're always excited about. But at the same time, it's a huge shock to your system. And it's, not just physically as well, mentally, emotionally, but also your time, your life, like everything's going to reorient.
Yeah.
Especially if you had such a sort of externally focused life before that, right? Yeah. So a lot of changes all at once. Mm-hmm. What's something that you've learned, like something that's really affected you, like really impacted you since that moment? Like if you're looking back now and thinking about what is one of the big takeaways that you've had from becoming a mom?
Ooh, the fact that you feel like you're teaching them and that you've got to get everything right, but then they're teaching you at the same time, right? Like and it's exciting to have it both ways. And Absolutely. Now both of my boys, they're 10 and 13. They're truly my best friends. And they're the two people awesome. I want to spend all my time with constantly because they're such great kids and they're so much fun. And so I want to take some credit, but it's really not me. It's them and who they are. And I get to hang out with them. I get to learn from them and, experience everything that they're going through. And so it's, kind of incredible.
Yeah. So this thing about learning more from them than you thought you would, that it's to be clearly a two-way street. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have several things that come up for me when you say that. One is, and I've said this a lot on this podcast, but biologically, parents make children. Emotionally, spiritually, mentally, children make adults.
That's so true. Wow.
Right? So you can't grow in ways that you grow as a parent unless you're a parent. And it's not that it's bad, but there's just things that you're going to deal with and be exposed to and learn, like you said, that you probably aren't going to get anywhere else. And the other thing I was thinking about, my daughter is a neuroscience, maybe pre-med major right now, and we love reading psychology books together. Even though she's overseas, we'll do FaceTime and read together. And we're reading this one I think it's called The Courage to be Disliked or something like that. It's a book on Adlerian psychology. Ooh. As Adler is like the counterbalance and much more appropriate than Freud in a sense. Freud is very sensational, but it's not really true. There's aspects of it there, but it's not really healthy. Okay. Where Adlerian is the balance. Adler was his contemporary at the time, is the balance. But he talked about in there about vertical and horizontal relationships. We were reading yesterday. Well, vertical relationships is where someone's judging somebody else. They have a position of power. You could think a lot about parent-child relationships or boss-subordinate relationships, right? Where you think it's our job to like judge or correct or fix. Whereas horizontal relationships, and when I lived in Germany, we'd call them vier Augen, four eyes, right? You're really seeing each other at the same, in the US, I think we'd call it at the eye level. Yeah. Right? Eye to eye. And I never really thought about it that way with my kids. And, but until I was reading that, like they said very clearly, even with kids, it's not our job to praise and it's not our job to judge. It's our job to appreciate and encourage. But it's not that we have all the answers, that they're actually, full human beings already at that point. And so I thought that was interesting when you brought that up about learning from them as well, which is really true. The second book, which I just recommended to a friend yesterday with a pile of other ones that I've learned from as a parent, but is called The Anatomy of Peace. And it's not specifically about children, but it's about seeing human beings in this horizontal relationship. Like, do you consider the person that you're interacting with to be a full human being whose dreams, concerns, desires, fears are here's the key, just as valid as your own?
Absolutely.
Right.
Horizontal.
Horizontal. Or, because the other option they present in this book, this Anatomy of Peace, is otherwise you're seeing them as an object. Those are the only two possibilities. Right. And that objects come in three categories: vehicles, something to use to get what we want; irrelevant, just ignore them, or obstacles, something to get around and get over. Unfortunately, for a lot of parents, and this was true for me in my first, till my kids were even older than yours, I hate to admit, Shannon, I saw them as vehicles. Like they were part of my life. Like I'm working really hard to build this really good life that includes kids, but I'm building my life with my kids, not seeing them as exactly co-equals, and how can I support their life?
Ooh, what was that change? Do you remember what changed to make you view it differently?
Yeah.
Putting you on the spot.
No, it's good. This is good. And it's in episode number 6, I think, of my podcast. I tell this story called From Heart at War to Heart at Peace. But I was at a monastery in New Mexico for my first silent retreat I ever did. I was in a very stressed out place in my life. And I had grabbed a book that I thought was the Message version of the Bible to take with me. But it was the same size and shape, but it was a book actually called Bonds That Make Us Free by the same author. He was one of the co-authors of Anatomy of Peace. But I hadn't read that book yet, but it had been recommended to me after I read Anatomy of Peace. And I was silent 5 days, only reading, meditating, journaling, and running. That was it. Nothing else. Eating and sleeping. And I was reading that book, and there was a story in there. Where a woman shared that epiphany that she had for herself, that she was checking all the boxes. She was superwoman, right? She was making the money. She was tucking her kids in. She was reading to them. She was helping them do their homework. She was making the meals. Like she was doing everything, checking all the boxes. But she wasn't seeing them as human beings. She was doing them because as she was the center of her life, and they were accessories to her life. And I realized very heart-wrenchingly, I was looking at it the same way. And that shifted. That shifted my relationship with my kids.
Wow. That's really powerful. Because I bet you so many people view it like that, not intentionally.
Right, not intentionally. It's not, I had no bad ill will whatsoever, right? That was just like, I'm doing what I should do, build this perfect life and kids. And I've always wanted kids and a family. And this is part of doing that, right? But it's insidious. Am I really seeing them as human beings?
Right.
Co-equal human beings to myself.
Right.
Or am I seeing them as accessories? Right. Really heart-wrenching and really shifted. Like it changed from like, all of a sudden my kids didn't have to perform at all for me. Right. So my older son that has reactive attachment disorder, when he's dropping F-bombs around all my Christian friends, my first thought isn't, oh, how does that reflect on me? My first thought, hey, my son's dysregulated. How can I serve him?
Right. Wow. Big difference. Yeah.
Right. But I think that's where a lot of parents get stuck is we want the best for our kids, but we want what we think is best for our kids.
Yes.
Which may or may not have anything to do with what God or they want for them.
No.
Right. So
it's totally,
I had a big aside there, but I wanted to, I thought that was a really great point that you brought out of a lot of people that have said becoming a mom or a dad is their biggest transition on this podcast. But you're the first one that really early on said because of the learning that I got to have. And it's great that you recognize it, why your kids are so young. And that's probably why you have such a good relationship. I've had good relationships with my kids most of the time, but let's call it 13 to 17 or 18 was the toughest time. But it's been much better with my younger ones because I had, unfortunately for the older one, a lot of learning with the older one.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right. So, no, it's good stuff. So you told us in the beginning, you said, okay, this was also a tipping point for many other things in your life. And that's part of the reason this was a big transition. Not only was it something you always wanted, but it affected everything else. So take us through a little bit, like what changed in your life. You're coming home, you're in pain. You have all these parents that maybe are looking at you not fully as a human being, even depending on their upbringing and how they're raised, right? And maybe feeling like you need to perform and you just want to curl up into a ball and disappear and stop hurting.
Yeah.
Take us through a little bit. How did it go? And what changed in your life?
Well, to be completely honest, that is when I had what was the onset of postpartum depression because and not diagnosed, I went through the motions, but it was my parents living on the other side of the country and me and my husband having this great full life full of friends, but in the entertainment industry where we worked, it's a bubble, and it's all
Right.
about going out 7 nights a week and who you know, and you're trying to get your next job. And it's, very altruistic, I guess. You're very, very selfish, like I mentioned earlier, in my eyes. And all of a sudden, those friends had disappeared because we were the first to have kids. And everything started shifting. And
so they're still doing their 7 nights a week out, and you can't do that anymore.
No. And they're not checking in with us because they didn't know, what they don't know. They weren't parents yet. And I don't fault them. It was just a very lonely time. And then,
can I ask you a really tough question about that?
Yeah, please.
Were those friends, like looking back now, so that's 13 years ago, were those friends real friends or deal friends?
Probably deal friends.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that bad, but it's a heartbreak. It's like, but there's a difference, right?
There's a difference. And
because deal friends are vehicles, going back to what we just talked about.
Yeah, and that was a very vehicle-oriented industry.
Right, I'm going to go to this party, not because I love this person, but because they know somebody that's going to get me my next, whatever it is, movie or script or whatever.
And I don't think we even realized that living in it. That was just the way the world.
And it's not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just to recognize which is which.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And in hindsight, absolutely,
Right.
And there are still some of those people who are my dear friends today, still in different phases of their life. But yeah, I think then that's why my phone wasn't ringing. And, and I only found that comfort through my parents that were on the other side of the country and kept coming back out because I needed them. But my husband went back to work, and I'm here with this we still don't know if it was colic, but he cried all day, every day, Art. And it was just, I remember watching long, repeated episodes of Lost and just sitting and rocking him all day long every day and just going, gosh, is this it? And getting an opportunity to go back and shoot like a small show. And I did it. We found a nanny to watch him very briefly. And then I realized, no, this isn't what I want. I don't want to be away from him and trust someone else. And so within 6 months, right around his 6-month birthday, we up and moved to the East Coast to be by my family. Very abrupt. I wasn't in the right mind frame to do so, but that was a huge transition to uproot my husband, uproot me, move in with my parents while we were shopping for a house. Yeah. And we immediately started working in Manhattan, which was a different world. Right. But yeah, it was just so many transitions. And I did that for about 3 more years until I had my second one. And that's when I said, no more. I don't want to miss first birthdays, and I don't want to be traveling and miss Halloween and this and that and not be home for bedtime. And that's when I think the wheels started turning with the birth of my first. But by the time I was pregnant with my second, I was like, I can hang up my hat. I accomplished my dream. And now I have to figure out what else I can do.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Midlife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes. You've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do. But you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. Midlife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition. And we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. Right. No, it's interesting because I was listening to Gabor Mate. I don't know if you're familiar with him, on a podcast yesterday with Mel Robbins, and I'm a fan of his. I've heard him on a lot of podcasts. I read his books. But he was talking about measuring the cortisol level in kids, 5 to 10 years old, that were the difference of being loved and held in utero, obviously held in utero, but loved and held also afterward.
Yeah.
For up to the first, 3 or 4 months, pretty consistently by mom, or ones that weren't. And the difference of the stress levels even years later in their system.
Wow.
Right. So if you think about the, hundreds of thousands or millions of years of human evolution, and how we lived in community. And we were born and we were in that band, and it was a whole village raising the kids, but it was mom raised, for the first months it was mom, and then everybody was raising mom during those first few months, right? They were taking care of mom. So mom didn't have to do anything except take care of the baby. And then now we have it where, like you're saying, your parents aren't even there, and you don't have, it's not that community. And then if you want to go to work, now you have to leave your baby. It's against our biology. What we're into now. And we're starting to see it. I mean, there's a lot of things driving this anxious generation that we have now. My kids, hopefully you'll do yours a lot better presence in social media, if you let them have it at all, and phones and all those things, than what I did, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that our current society does that is not in line with our container, with our biology. And it's starting to show up in a lot of ways that we are just now starting to understand.
Yeah, it's very sad.
So you at least had the courage, Shannon, to uproot. Like you said, you weren't in a space to make the decision, but in a sense you were. You knew you were at the end of your rope and you need some help. So let's go back where I know I can get some help.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah, best decision we could have made.
To be honest with you, if my wife had said that, I probably would have said no. I don't know how to do that. I need to keep with my job because that's how we're paying the bills. Yeah, right. Yeah. So kudos to you and your husband to make that decision.
Yeah.
And how long you were on the East Coast? You said 3 years?
I was, 3 years on the East Coast before I had my second.
Okay. And are you still on the East Coast now, or are you back on the West Coast? Are you still on the East Coast?
We could never leave my parents now. They're best friends with my kids, and, it's just, it's a different way of life, but the best.
Yeah, no, which I think is, it's really great that you have active grandparents. And it's another marker for well-adjusted kids is if they know their grandparents and know their grandparents' story even, because it gives a foundation of where they came from and stuff. I remember taking my kids to see my dad's childhood home in Rahway, New Jersey. Yeah. At one point. And it was the first time I'd seen it as well. But I was like, just to give a little bit of, when we were moving back from China and re-Americanizing the kids,
I bet, yeah. And it's so special to them too. I mean, right now my dad is here with my 13-year-old because he's off of school, and they are the same person, and it's incredible to see,
That's awesome.
And I think my dad makes my sons better too. There's just a very special relationship. So absolutely, we're very blessed. Yeah.
No, that's great. And it's individual generations, especially skip generations, left completely on their own generation, they tend to go to their lowest performance, lowest level of energy. Yeah. And if you mix 3 generations, they go to the highest.
I love that.
So old people on their own, they're going to bitch and cry and complain, right? And grump. And young people, especially boys, will get into trouble, right? But if you put those 3 generations together, they support each other. Yeah. Right.
It's beautiful.
So that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. So now you've stayed on the East Coast. What other areas or what other ways did becoming a mom change your life?
Well, like I said, it really made me figure out what I wanted to do as far as work goes. And I did not want to be missing things. I didn't want to be away as much as I loved my television career and what I was doing. I loved absolutely everything about it, but it was missing. Like I said, I missed my first son's first birthday, and that's haunted me forever. So little things like that I kept missing. And so when I was about 8 months pregnant with my second, I just had this epiphany moment in the Times Square subway station, trying to get the bus to get back to daycare, pick up daycare. And it was just this very stressful moment. And I read about it in my book because it's just so over the top emotional, 8 months pregnant in heels. And I just said, this is crazy. And the funny part is that I was supposed to interview Taylor Swift that evening. And I said, nope, you guys can do it. My team can go and do it. And I needed to get to daycare, which now I can say I regret it a little bit because she's huge and that would have been really great. But I just realized it wasn't important to me anymore. And that I just really wanted to be with them. And then after I had him, my show got canceled. And I used that as a sign to not pick up the phone and get that next job, because that's how I would have done it in the past. But I said, no, let me figure out what else I can do with all of this experience and these skills and quote unquote, produce my own life and figure out what I can do that now fits a mom with 2 young boys.
Right.
And that's what I set out to do then.
And what did you find? And I go ahead. What did you find?
Well, I ended up realizing I did some missteps. I took a 9-to-5 job, which was toxic and awful. I started going for a master's degree at night online and realized, what am I doing? I don't want to be a teacher. So I tried some things. And finally I was like, no, I'm going to go into business. And I opened a franchise that taught children STEM education. So I could bring my kids with me and I could work out of the house. So that was my first venture into entrepreneurship.
Awesome. And I want to highlight a couple of things because you say it with a little bit of reservation, like, oh, I tried a bunch of things that didn't work, but that's how you find what does work.
Yes.
Right. So it's actually perfectly good and normal that you do that. And for everybody listening, that's what transitions, they take some time and it's not even missteps. They take going down paths or climbing mountains that you say, oh, this one's not for me. Once you have enough visibility, if you think about climbing a mountain, right, it's only when you go up that you can see around.
Yes.
And as you start to go up, you go, oh, this one's not for me. The mistake that most people make, and I made in life, and most people make, is that they keep going up the mountain because they've already gotten 1,000 feet up.
Yeah.
And then they go 2,000 and then 3 or 4. And if they're lucky, now they don't think this at the time, if they're lucky, the mountain runs out at 5,000 feet. And then it forces them to think about, do I really want to stay here at the wind whipping around me, or do I want to go back down and do something else? Right.
You just made me think. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you just made me think about it in this way of that. I think for me, I was very self-aware of what it was going to take for me to leave my dream job because it was hanging there saying, Shan, you can come back. You can come back and produce. You know, my friends were all still in the industry. My husband was in the industry. But I think for me, I didn't want to settle at something that just really didn't feel aligned. I knew there was something that could feel aligned that would check all those boxes per se to make me keep moving forward so that I didn't revert back. And I think that's where being self-aware for anyone listening, like just knowing what you want and what your priorities are when you are in transition can help you stay on that right path. Right? Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really one of our most difficult tasks, if you quote Joseph Campbell, is to know what it is we want.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Right? I mean, most people don't have the luxury and privilege to ever ask that question, quite frankly. And in some ways, this is going to sound awful, in some ways they have it easier because they always just say, well, I would be completely happy. Like they have a reason why they're not completely happy because they're not able to even think about what they want. Whereas those that accomplish everything that they want or thought they wanted, if they climb that first mountain and realize, wait a minute, this isn't for me, there's a whole nother level of self-awareness to figure out how can I really contribute? And one thing I want to bring in here, maybe challenge a little bit on too, Shannon, is being a mom is also a really important job.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's enough, at least for the first 15 years, it's enough, right? It's not that, and I'm not saying it's enough, like you can't do other things if you want to, not at all, but you don't have to feel like you're not enough just because you're just a mom. This is the most important and most difficult job and the one you really wanted. You talked about, dream jobs, sort of separating. I would like to encourage you to put mom back into that category of dream jobs, and you can have two, right? You can do both. It's fine. But it's a really important one, and you're doing it really well. And I think it's also wonderful. They say, hey, I did a business. I want to do business, and how can I do a business that I can involve my kids with?
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's what was also pulling you toward being a teacher, but that's not being a business. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah. And I think it was the societal pressure, maybe pressure I put on myself that, well, I knew we couldn't really be a one income household. So then you have those pressures that are like, well, what else can you do? What else can you do? And I think a lot of times when you're trying to transition into something else, you have shiny object syndrome and you see something and you're like, great, let me jump towards that. And
I have shiny object syndrome all the time, not even when I'm just transitioning.
I know. And so it's so easy again to like jump. And then but you want to have that awareness to be like, no, that doesn't feel right. I'm glad I tried it. Now let me try the next thing. But you're right. If I could have stayed home for the first few years, I absolutely would have. But I think the creative side of me always wanted I had to.
For sure.
Yes.
And we need to nurture that too.
Yeah,
I mean, we need, it's creativity is, it's God's gift to us. What we do with it is our gift back to God, right? If you read the Artist Way right over there on the stack. So yeah, it's really important, and it's not to not do that, but to also acknowledge that being a mom is also a really important job as well.
The best job,
right? As being a dad, and the mom is biologically more connected than the dad, Right. That's the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So you founded this STEM Education Center,
Yes,
as a franchise. And how are you still running that, or did you do that for a while? Or
I ran it for 8 years, and I sold it last year successfully in 2024. Yeah,
nice.
so it's still going. It's my baby, but it's someone else is taking care of it now.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you.
So well done. So really, being a mom has its own shifted you in a lot of ways, and especially dealing with postpartum and recognizing the importance of family and connection. But it also completely drove different career paths. So what are you on to now? As we said in the intro, now you're a career transitions coach.
Yes. I began that business maybe 4 or 5 years into the other business. So
Right.
I ran them both simultaneously because it was very organic. I had customers of mine asking me, well, how did you go from television production to this? Can you help me? And then
Right.
friends started asking me, and I started just helping. And I said, you know what? There is such a need, especially with moms in midlife, with young kids, that are feeling misaligned like I was, and that they need that help getting from where they are to where they want to be. And as we talked about, I struggled trying to do it on my own, and I wanted to be that kind of accountability partner for others. So I launched the business, I guess it was 2022, alongside the franchise. I had a big team running that, but my coaching took off faster than I thought it would. And it became, a lot to do both. And I said, you know what? I helped families and children for so many years. Let me really focus on women now and moms. And so my heart kind of started bleeding more into that area. And
nice.
Yeah.
And is it mostly young moms, like helping them figure out a career that matches with moms, or is it just any career transition that you're helping your clients with?
Yeah, it's really just women. I guess that's like a majority of the women I work with, but I also work with 60-year-olds and older that are realizing like, I'm not finished yet. What else can I do? Yeah. Like I had a divorcee who came to me and she said, I spent my whole life helping my husband build his business, and now I want something. So I think, I think maybe I'm relatable to those, moms, but really any woman who just feels like it doesn't feel like a good fit. And especially people who want to go into entrepreneurship as well, and they want to appreciate the skills and experience they've had. And how can they shift that into something that maybe gives them that flexibility and freedom in their next act of life,
and maybe joy and creativity and other things that they're not able to tap into as much as they want to or in the way they want to in a 9-to-5.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, no, that's great. I want to connect you with my coach Tammy Alvarez. She was also on the podcast a while back, but that's her story as well. A little bit later in career, but her story as well. And now she does Career Winner Circle with empowering women and sometimes men, because I'm one of her coachees as well. But
fantastic! I'd love to meet her.
Yeah, and we're having a conference up in New York in October. Maybe we connect at that point.
I love that.
Or you could be one of her speakers or something.
Fantastic.
No, that's really great stuff. If you look back on these 13 years, what would you like to tell your younger self? Like if you go back to the emergency C-section, the plans are not the plans. I'm in pain. My life feels wonderful and horrible at the same time.
Yeah.
What would you want your younger self to know that you now know that you didn't know 13 years ago?
I love that question so much. I think that do what you're going to do. He's going to be even more incredible than you can ever imagine. And I could just cry. I like talking about it because he is.
Me too.
Yeah. And both of them, I mean, they're just, and I don't take credit for it at all, but my son is incredible. He's like a star theater kid, the smartest at an academic private school. And just, I feel like his future is just anything he could absolutely want. And I don't know if I had told you this, but this June, I'm taking just he and I, my 13-year-old and I, to Europe on a trip because he turned 13. I sold my business and I wrote a book. And I just feel like there's a lot to celebrate, and my little one thinks that Europe is too much walking still. So it's going to be he and I, and I'm just so excited to share that with him because he still wants to hang out with me and be with me all the time.
Of
and
course.
I'm scared
Isn't
for
that wonderful?
So I'm like, it's going to be so special. And I'm like so beyond excited. So I would never have imagined that 13 years ago at that stage of life.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And I hope you guys have a great time. I know that you will. And he's always going to want to hang out with you, by the way.
I sure hope
because
so.
of the way you've seen him, right? And that's what people want to be seen, right? And you see him.
He's a good person.
Yeah, and that's what matters, right? That's the measure of success, not whether he's even the smartest kid in the class or makes $1 billion, right? Yeah. Is he a good person with a good heart? And are you seeing him and then therefore teaching him to see others? Yeah. Right? Are you passing along your joy and your dreams or your pain and suffering?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Which both, I mean, probably both, because all parents pass on both.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not, our fault, so to speak. But we want to pass on more of the good if we can.
Yes.
And less of, do our own healing. So we have less of the bad to pass on to them. All right. For sure. This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life, if you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching. Or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. So no, that's wonderful. And it's a great representation of where your relationship is today. So congratulations on that. And I think when I listened to your answer, though, that you said, do what you're going to do, he'll be okay, or they'll be okay. At the time it was, he'll be okay. What I read into that, and tell me if I'm wrong, was that you can take care of yourself because they're going to be okay. As long as you take them with you and be with them and love them, that they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you meant it that way, but that's what I heard. Interesting when you think about like moving from LA back to the East Coast, right? Back to New York.
You're right.
I think that's a very powerful message, because especially women, and generally, especially moms, especially moms, are geared to taking care of everybody else, but you really can't take care of everybody else if you don't have anything to take care from.
That's so true.
And that's why in older societies, the moms were taken care of as a priority, because they take care of the baby with a lot of help, but they're taken care of so that they have something to take care of from. And I know a lot of people miss that. Right? A lot of moms feel that they won't have they have an obligation to take care of others, and they don't feel an obligation. They don't feel the right or the permission to take care of themselves.
Yeah. It's so true.
Which is the first step of taking care of others. So no, good for that. Where do you think, Shannon, if you hadn't become a mom, where do you think your life would be like if you do that other path? Where would your life be today?
I don't think I would have let that happen. I feel whether it was adopt or anything like that. I feel like it was in the cards.
We adopted.
Yeah. But I think I would have still been in TV, to be honest, because I loved it. So I don't know if I'd necessarily be as happy as I was in my 20s doing it. But I feel like I would be living that kind of life. But I really don't want it. So, I feel like everything does work out if you just follow your intuition and see where it takes you.
How do you tap into that? What's your process to know, follow your intuition? There's a lot inside that sentence.
There is. And I honestly don't know. I think my parents raised me to be very independent and follow, I was the black sheep in the family who left my small town. I was the first to go to college. I moved to the West Coast to go to Hollywood. And I think they gave me the permission to do that. And they saw that drive in me and just encouraged it every way through. And so I think that was probably what makes me really trust myself in a sense that if I'm a good person and I'm good to others and I'm nice and say my please and thank yous, that, you get on that right path and things will fall into place. So maybe it's,
you had a lot of practice following that intuition and being validated and being seen in that from your parents.
Yeah. I think that's what it was. And just trust, again, trusting that, you take one step and as long as you can be aware to say, oh, that's not the right step, let's make a pivot and see where else I can go.
Yeah, no, I think that, I don't know if it's Brene Brown or someone that says, once you learn to trust yourself, everything else becomes simple. Not necessarily easy, but simple because you know what it is that you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. No, that's really beautiful. If you could give one tool to anybody going through transition, or maybe it's to focus on new moms, or people going through a career shift, since that's your profession now, what would that tool be? Something that anybody can apply that they can hit pause and do right now.
Give yourself grace and remind yourself that you're worthy. Because I think a lot of times we don't, let ourselves know that, remind ourselves that we're worthy of changing our current situation. So you can feel like you're misaligned or you're stuck, but you're worthy. It's not selfish. You're worthy of trying to make that change, to feel whole again, to feel where you want to be and feel fulfilled. But give yourself grace when you're going through because it's not easy, but know that it's worth it.
So give yourself grace to have the mistakes but know you're worthy of putting in the effort, worthy of taking the time to explore, worthy to disrupt things in your life like you did in very big ways because you'll get to something that's more important for you.
Absolutely.
And that's great advice. I love it. It's the first chapter of my book that I wrote to my kids. You are worthy. What is your tool for helping yourself feel worthy? What would you say to somebody saying, yeah, that sounds nice. I wish I could feel worthy, but I don't feel worthy.
It's pen and paper, journaling, like you mentioned before. And just, I think writing down, letting yourself explore what those voices in your head are telling you, what those like secret dreams or wishes that you could do, because they don't have to be so far off. And I think just taking that pen and paper, sitting and having that conversation with yourself, it works wonders. And that's, really just turning inward, which we go through the motions so often, we don't do that enough. And
100% agree. 100% agree. If you haven't done Artist Way, for listeners, pick that up. That's a great 12-week process of turning inward and journaling. And it's also, I had a guest a little while back who is the creator and complete writer of MacGyver TV series.
Oh, wow.
So he's a little bit older than me. Even I grew up on MacGyver.
Yes,
right? It's a little bit. I would say maybe a little bit younger than you, or a little bit older than you. But that's his whole process. Like he could write the whole show in 1 week for every episode by just writing the question and then occupying his mind with something else for 20 or 30 or 40 minutes, and then coming back and writing the answers.
Brilliant. Wow.
And that was his whole method.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a great way to tap into both. I want to add to it a little bit, both, the inspirations that are coming in to write about, to capture those voices, also to capture the negative voices, because they will, and it's not bad. They're trying to do good for you. Yeah. Actually, but they will block you if you give them too much voice. So you need to be curious about those two, and where is that coming from, and what's the purpose? Yeah. One of the questions I ask those negative voices is, how old are you? Because almost always they're very, very young and very insecure, and they're trying to protect me from something. Yeah. And it turns out after I was doing this for a while, there's a whole school of psychology called Internal Family Systems by Richard Schwartz. And there's many books out there about this, which I found out after I was starting to do it. So both sides, to listen to both voices in writing or an audio journal is a great way to do that. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. My question now is, where can people find out more about you? You're very interesting. You've been through many transitions. I really appreciate you sharing them so vulnerably on the podcast. Where can people connect with you, Shannon?
They can connect with me at secondactsuccess.co. That's where you can get links to my new book, to free resources about career change and building a business, and my podcast and everything. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's great. We'll post all of that in the show notes along with your full bio. And I encourage all of your listeners that are going through career transition, reach out. This sounds like someone who's walked the talk and now can share that experience. When you've grown an organic coaching business, that's really well done, Shannon.
Thank you very much, Art. This was such a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It was really useful for me, and I think for all of our listeners as well.
Good. Thank you.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.